Um, all right, so we're recording here. And so most of the stuff that people were wanting to talk about today, I got a lot of questions about relationship mirrors. I got a lot of questions about kind of early life trauma and how that gets imprinted into our relationship behaviors. And then also a lot of people asking about money programs. So we'll kind of see how we evolve into this and how we evolve this with some of the more specific things that are going on in your lives. So as I start talking about this stuff, if it rings true to you or if it's bringing up questions, feel free to type them in and I will continue to dig into, really who's willing to speak up and ask the questions that you want to dig into. So everything that happens to us when, let's step back. So when we are in our mother's womb, after we have been conceived, every emotion, every experience, every trauma that our mother goes through gets imprinted on us subconsciously. And that subconscious imprint then plays out through our lives as the initial catalyst for the lessons that we came here to learn. And so what that means is if our mother had certain issues where, maybe she was bullied, or maybe she had people suppress her imagination, or any of these kinds of things get imprinted on us subconsciously. And what that means is these things exist at a level that is below our perception or before we had conscious perception. And so to dig into those things, we can't easily use meditation to figure out what they're telling us, right? And so if we're just meditating, hoping to come up across this stuff, how do we meditate to get to something we don't even know what it is? And part of that game is to start to trace the patterns that have shown up in our relationships that are based on how our parents showed us what love was, right? And what that means is the way that our parents demonstrated love in front of us and demonstrated affection and demonstrated how they interacted with each other gets imprinted on us subconsciously. And that ends up playing out in all of our relationships from then on. And so part of this game is to look at our current mirrors and look at our early life imprints to say, oh, the reason that I'm interacting with this person in this way is because they are simply playing out something that subconsciously feels like love to me, right? And so what that means is consciously this toxic relationship, or you having a difficulty in letting go of a relationship is playing out in such a way that it's basically showing you that consciously, that's not love. Consciously, that you're saying yes to something that you might otherwise be saying no to, but subconsciously that feels like home. And so acknowledging the fact that subconsciously these behaviors that you really don't like, that don't feel good, that you're saying, why is this showing up in my life, are actually things that you are subconsciously outputting, and they're being channeled back to you so that you can see that mirror. Right? So any of these relationship interactions that you're having, whether it's with your parents, or whether it's with your roommates, or it's with a significant other or a partner that you're trying to work with, all of these different themes that show up in these relationships are simply showing you where you have a subconscious output that you're not currently aware of. And that's an important thing to think about, because when you have things happening in your relationship where you're not receiving the pieces of that relationship that you're actually asking for, or you're not actually, you don't feel like, or maybe you feel like you're settling for something in this relationship that may not be not quite what you're asking for, but you keep telling yourself, well, it's pretty good. I don't have any complaints about it, but it's not quite what I'm asking for. And so you keep going back to these patterns. These are always pointing you to those subconscious outputs that you have, that you can start to reframe and tell a new narrative about. Now, when we start to look at that, so let's look at some of these, because I think most of the stories that a lot of people have are abandonment sort of stories. And so when we have these abandonment threads that show up, we find that we tend to hold on to things out of fear of, if I let this thing go, it's permanent, it's forever, I can't change my mind, and there's a pain involved in that. So when we come together in a certain kind of relationship, and this relationship dynamic is one where, maybe one of the people withholds love, or one of the people, you start to get closer, then suddenly something subtle, you guys have kind of one foot out the door and something happens and you both kind of run away, and then you come back together and then you run away, and there's this instability that exists, both of you being afraid of losing each other, but both of you being afraid of actually being fully committed in your integrity in this moment. Because part of what happens is when we're looking through these relationships and we're saying, you know what, I'm looking at you and I want to feel good when I'm looking at you. I want you to do the things that make me feel good. Stop being selfish. And not realizing that that person's just mirroring our subconscious output, so that we can, it's a tool that allows us to say, oh, the reason I'm not receiving this love, or I'm not receiving this affection, or I'm not receiving this specific thing that I'm really wanting out of this relationship, is because I have a guard up, so I'm not outputting it myself. And so if you feel that somebody's not showing you compassion, somebody's not giving you enough affection, sometimes there's certain imbalances that are happening within you that are being asked to be looked at a deeper level. And so if you can look at those imbalances and start to show yourself where part of it is a narrative. So a lot of times when we're interacting in relationship, we start projecting ourselves into the future without being willing to kind of be honest with the narratives that are happening in the relationship in this moment. And so what that means is, if we have a false story about what we think, so if we think somebody's is cheating on us, or somebody's going to leave, or any of these kinds of things, we are outputting that energy, and it creates that mirror in the person that we're actually interacting with. Right. And so we want to really start to take ownership of those kinds of things, because if we always have the fear of someone leaving, or we have the fear of being alone, all we're doing is we're actually creating scenarios where we can maintain that feeling. Now, it's not about necessarily convincing yourself, oh, I don't need to feel that way. Instead, it's actually about honoring the fact that you do feel that way, that you do have that fear. You have that fear of somebody leaving. You have that fear of not being enough, that there's somebody who is going to maybe show up who's better and take them out from under you. Not realizing that when you can truly show up, and you can show up as in the awareness that you yourself in this moment are complete and you are enough, then that whole entire story, that whole entire fear that shows up can start to dissolve, so that you can interact with those people in a more organic way. Right. And so thanks. I like the hat too. It's important to really step back in these relationships. So, I don't know if you guys can type in the chat box a little bit. If you don't know where it is, it's down at the bottom of the screen there. How many of you guys are struggle with kind of abandonment type themes? Is it something that are you afraid of being alone? Or do you get stuck in relationships and then have a really hard time breaking up, separating from them? Do you have a lot of fears that do you tend to sacrifice or betray yourself in order to avoid betraying somebody else? Are these themes that any of you guys tend to go through, or are they things that I'm sure everybody has gone through them at one point or another in your relationships? And so it's important to really step into the truth of what the narrative is telling you. So when you're sitting at home and you're feeling either lonely, or you're wanting to reach out to an ex, or you're in a relationship and you're lonely sitting next to the person that you're with, it's always showing you where you are withholding an energy that's asking to be moved through you. So Okay, so I'm getting some questions. Let me see what people are asking. So if you're always in a relationship where you feel like you are a burden, right? So if there's a burden story that shows up and you feel like there are people around you who are always sacrificing and coming in to rescue you, and you feel guilty about them always coming in to support you in that way, that could be financially, that could be in love, that could be a whole bunch of different things. Part of that story is helping you to find gratitude. It's not your work to block someone else off from coming in to support you, because you are outputting the energy that is attracting that, right? So if you're really wanting money to pay for a thing, and a family member or a significant other or your partner comes in and helps you out of nowhere to pay for it, you have two options there. You can either feel guilty that you weren't able to come up with that money yourself, and these people keep showing up to support you, and you don't feel good enough because you weren't able to come up with the money yourself. Or you can tell the more empowering story to say, I was able to create a resource that brought this money in for me. It doesn't matter where the money came from, because I was asking for that money and it came in to support me in that way. And so in the same way for your relationships, if you're asking for a thing to show up, if you're really needing that kind of support and you're outputting that energy and needing to, and you're feeling that, to you, love might be that self-sacrifice program still. You might believe that in order for someone to prove that they love you, they should be bending over backwards and betraying themselves in order to avoid betraying you. And so part of that game is to recognize that and say, well, is that really the love dynamic that I want? Is that who I would want to be? Is that how I want to interact? Do I want to be betraying myself in order to avoid betraying everybody else? Or do I want to stand in my integrity? Do I want to honor myself and uphold strong agreements with the people that I'm interacting with, so that they know where the door is, and then allow them to use that specific doorway as a means for interacting with you in a more genuine way, and also finding their own power? Because a lot of times if these people are coming in and they are sacrificing and they're betraying themselves in order to avoid betraying you, it's not really your job to say, hey, stop betraying yourself. It's your job to stand in your integrity and appreciate it. And if they are getting resentful and they're getting signals crossed, part of that work is then to work on your agreements with your partner in that context. So the agreements that you have are what determine how you guys can interact and what boundaries that you guys can have. And if you aren't clear on your agreements, then you guys will keep stepping on each other's toes, and you'll keep crossing each other's boundaries without necessarily intending to do that. And so part of that game is getting clear on those agreements. How, what is okay? How do you guys want to interact? What does it look like when you're sitting on the couch? What does it feel like when you guys are, are you allowed to see other people? Are you, what is your intimate relationship supposed to be like? What are you allowed to ask for? Being able to have a clear agreement on how you guys want to interact fosters much cleaner communication, so that you can navigate whatever the inputs that are coming from your universe, and be able to make just more clear decisions, so that you're not betraying yourself. You're operating from a point of integrity and saying, yeah, yesterday I did want to go to that pool party, but today it just doesn't align with what I want to be doing right now. And so being able to be in your integrity in each of those moments also allows the people around you to show up in their integrity. And then you can co-create a much more powerful relationship dynamic out of that. But it's I say that like it's easy, but it's not easy work, because what happens is the reason that those agreements aren't clear already is because we want the partner that we're communicating with to we want them to like us, right? And so we believe that if we ask for what we want, we believe that if we interact with them in the organic way that our soul is asking us to interact with them in, that these people won't like us and they'll push us away, and they might, right? And that's okay. And so part of that is to honor that, the process of refinement that happens when you begin to show up. Because the universe around you is always going to be created as you and through you. So that means, how are you showing up? What is your personality? What are you asking for? How are you interacting with what you're asking for? And so that then will be changed by by being mirrored back to you through the people that you're interacting with. And when you can get clearer on how you are, when you start to notice the changes that happen when you output a slightly different signal, it allows you more information. So you say, oh, when I was feeling that way, or I had this subtle sensation in my chest when I was interacting with that, and then this result happened, and now I've seen that result happen a couple of times as it matched that certain feeling. Now I can start to draw a thread between all of these different interactions and start to gain clarity in how I can interact with the people and the business and the stuff that I'm really trying to dig into. And let me see. Let's see. So we can talk. So a lot of this stuff that that a lot of us are working on is kind of trauma bonding patterns and codependency in areas where, you know, traditionally we have been programmed to operate under certain rules and guidelines that we're evolving out of. And it's not to say that those family dynamics shouldn't still exist and be a big part of it, but part of the self-sacrifice paradigm does not fit in the consciousness container that we are starting to live within. So as we expand in our consciousness and we're able to look in the mirror and we're allowed to hold ourselves with more awareness and we're able to interact with the energies that are coming in a more profound way, part of the lessons in that are showing us who we really are. And if we are always showing up in a way that we think other people want to see us so that they feel good when they look at us, we are not remembering who we really are. And so there's so much of this kind of new age movement that teaches self-sacrifice and that teaches you that, you know, all are one. And when all are one, we just need to like learn to be unattached and not care about the things that those interactions are teaching us. And the truth is, the more you show up in your fullest capacity, the less often you get catalysts and mirrors that show up that conflict with that. So the conflicting catalysts and the things that are pushing you out of in a way that doesn't feel good are literally just signals that are trying to bring you back into that alignment where you have your power and where you can interact with your reality in a more potent way. Let me read a couple of these questions and see what folks are asking to. It's connected with my best friends. I have to be better than I am in order to gain their friendship, or they will go away. Okay, so this is really basically a lot of the stuff that I've been talking to. So like I said, so whether it's our career or our life or our financial situation or our partners or all of these different things, are based on the energy that we output. Our world is created based on our personality that we show up within. So as we continue to refine that, as we continue to practice showing up in new ways, not necessarily the right way, because there is no right. It's about experiencing the different variables that we want to try on. You know, the same reason that I can try on a different hat. Right? We can try these different things and play with a different hat and play with a different look and play with a different personality. And that then shapes the people that surround us. And the painful thing that we have when we first start doing this work is we are letting go of certain pieces of us that matched the old friendships. And when we are still trying to hold on to those old friendships, we are also holding on to parts of our identity that are not meant to grow in the way that we are growing throughout every other area of our life. And so if you can realize that the group of friends and the people that surround you are always based on your current subconscious output, that gives you a whole lot of power to temporarily let go of the friends who are no longer in alignment or the relationships that are no longer in alignment, because it's all about that energetic alignment. So when I shift and I allow new people to come in and match that, then these are people who are genuinely matching who I want to be right now. I'm not having to filter myself. I'm not having to show up in a different capacity so that my old friends, so that I can have an old interaction in trying to bring my new hat into my old interactions, so to speak. What happens is, as you show up, you get this new friend, this new group of friends who 100% supports you in being who you currently are. And that feels way better than you having to filter yourself for your old friendships. By doing that, by showing up in a fuller capacity and allowing those old friendships to see where you're upholding new boundaries, where you're showing up brighter, where you're not filtering yourself, that gives those friends an opportunity to step through the same growth that you are now getting the opportunity to step through. If you filter yourself, you're not demonstrating for them in any way how to grow. And you can't tell somebody. You literally just have to show up and stop filtering yourself and trust that the universe co-creates that with you to bring the right people and the right ears and the right eyes into your life so that the right mirrors and interactions can show up. These relationships and these people, they might come back later, they might not. But if you focus on your alignment and allow the right people to come in, none of that matters because you realize it's not up to you to control that. Your job is just to output the energy and allow the universe to control it and match it. And then you get clearer on the energy that you're outputting so that the universe more distinctly matches how you want to interact with that. So it's not easy. That's why it's a practice. You know, a lot of times we gain this awareness, we gain this insight, and you're like, oh, that makes total sense. And that resonates and you're ready to do it. It's not so easy. It takes little pieces of trying this little thing tomorrow and this little thing today and just refining how you show up and feeling what figuring out what makes you proud of yourself and what feels good to interact in that way, but also allowing yourself to fall into those old patterns. Our ego is a part of us. So our ego is really not something we want to reject. It's not something we want to isolate. It's not something we want to do away with. Our ego is a really important part of how we pick a direction. It's our anchor point, right? That we set our identity in. And when our identity is still holding on to old ways of making money or old ways of relating or all of these different things, we're always aiming back there. Our ego is trying to hold on to that. So that when we step up into this new way, our ego's like, no, we haven't been there before. We don't know what that looks like. You're going to die if you do that. Right. And so the process of working through that is to look back at the narrative that your ego is telling you that, you know, where it absolutely is right that it feels like you're going to die. You can't argue with it. That's the truth of what you feel when you go to do that stuff. But when you get into the narrative and you allow yourself to balance that narrative in a more profound way so that you can say, oh, well, I see why I would feel that way. I have had experiences in my life that would make me feel that way, but I have grown since then. And I can paint a different picture of that same story that is also true. And when I can paint a bigger picture of that same story that's also true, it allows me to lose momentum in the direction I don't want to go in and start to build momentum in the direction I do want to go in. So let me read a couple more here. So relationship stuff where we are afraid of committing to a relationship. Let's say that we have a partner that, for all intents and purposes, is a great partner, a great potential partner, but we are having trouble kind of fully diving into that and looking, maybe we look for flaws, maybe we just are keeping one foot out the door. And a lot of these are still abandonment wounds where we are afraid of getting stuck in a less than ideal situation because we are afraid of being trapped. And so these are pointing to certain masculine energy imbalances that need to be worked on, because we, the feminine wants support and love, and the masculine wants freedom. And when the feminine is trying to steal freedom from the masculine, it makes the masculine feel trapped. And so part of the dynamic that needs to be cultivated through your agreements and needs to be cultivated both through your self-awareness is the awareness that, you know, where are you feeling trapped and is that true? right? So if you're in a relationship, let's kind of build a scenario here. Let's say that you were hanging out with somebody and you got backed into a corner, but it's kind of cool, and you moved in together, and you're telling a story that, oh well, if I break up now, they won't have anywhere to live, or they won't have anywhere to do all these things, and so you're sacrificing yourself and betraying yourself in order to avoid betraying this other person. And at the same time, you might say, well, I'm not going to move in with this person because I don't want to get stuck. What if somebody better shows up? Or what if some other opportunity shows up? And all of these are stories. We tell these stories, or ego tells these stories, because it wants to keep us safe. It only knows history. And so if we are wanting to get out of that trap, if we're wanting to change, if we're wanting to experiment with something new, we always 100% of the time have the power to do that. What stops us is the obligations and the fears and the narratives and the story that gets in our way from making those new choices. And that is a thing that requires some practice to dig into, to figure out where is it that we feel trapped? Why are we making these choices that are putting the narrative in our head that we aren't allowed to do something else? And can we give ourselves permission to do what we want to do and to want what we want to want? And then from that point of permission, decide whether that is actually the move we want to make. Because there's two different layers here. Giving yourself permission to want what you want and to do what you want to do. Permission is not action. Permission is a release of the burden of not being allowed to do something. Because you're the only one ultimately who gives yourself permission to do whatever you want. You just then have to weigh that against the outcomes of whatever that energy is going to create for you. And none of those are right or wrong. All of those are up to your discernment and up to your preference and up to kind of what makes you feel good when you're stepping through that process. And that is, for most people, that's a really kind of a scary place to be, because we have never operated from a place of true integrity in a lot of our relationships. We always are filtering. We always are giving up something we want because we don't want to hurt the person we're with, or we're saying yes to things that we should be saying no to, or we're sticking around longer than we should because of a certain obligation that shows up. And all of those are pointing you to childhood wounds that taught you what love was. And to you, that is love. Those kinds of sacrifices are love. And part of the work within that is to realize that's actually not love. That is just a trauma bonding program that you have been living through this whole time. And being able to release that program and release that narrative allows the energy of love to flow through you in a much more organic way. And then all of those relationship dynamics actually get closer and better and more communicative and better integrity, rather than the opposite of what you might imagine by putting that arm up. Relationships get better with boundaries, not worse, because boundaries are simply meant to show people where the door is. And if you are constantly used to people just knocking the walls down, and you think knocking the walls down is love, that's okay. You can honor that, because that is the belief that you've been running, and that is the thing that you feel, and that is important to honor that. But at the same time, you can choose how you want to interact with that. And giving yourself the power to interact in a more powerful and potent way can really clarify how you can interact in your relationships and show up in a more profound way, and stop saying, well, I've always done this. This is what I've always known. I guess I should keep showing up this way. But I see all these other ways of interacting that I really want to try, and I'm just afraid to try them. And is there an opportunity for you to work with your partner, or even a potential partner, to say, hey, I'm trying to wear these different hats because I really want to see how I can show up in the world. Would you be willing to provide a safe container where we can explore this? Can we create a safe container where we can ask for what we want, where we can interact in a way that we don't expect the other person to behave in a way that, we're not needing our partner to behave in a certain way so that we feel good. Instead, we say, I have this medicine. Would you like it? And whether they say yes or no is not the reason you offered the medicine. Because a lot of times we get lost in needing, and our ego gets lost in us needing to succeed at teaching somebody the thing that they needed. And we need somebody to succeed at the transformation or the learning of the new thing or the showing up differently or whatever it is that they are, that you're talking to them about at the moment. But that effectively gets in your way from being able to actually provide the strongest catalysts and plant the best seeds. Because we really just want to be planting seeds. We want to know that everything that I talk about today, you all will receive it at different levels of your consciousness and different levels of your awareness, and you'll translate it through your experiences. And so if I'm too fixated on needing you guys to hear the exact message that I'm wanting you to hear, then you won't hear any of the message that I'm trying to deliver for you. And so it's really important in all of our interactions. If you're a coach, if you're a designer, if you're an artist, if you're a speaker, any of these kinds of things, realizing that the process is a planting of seeds and a refining of how you plant those seeds and a joy of planting the seeds and the process within that brings you to your purpose, that brings you to the way to communicate that is much more powerful. Because then you start to realize, oh wait, it's not that I need to bear fruit from all these seeds I'm planting, but that I need to plant more seeds so that all of these people can then run and help others by planting more seeds and by spreading that sort of abundance around and allowing people to find their own truth within what I'm saying. Because nothing what I'm saying is necessarily the truth, right? So all of the things that I talk about are not to say what you used to believe is wrong and what I'm telling you now is right. It's to say I'm giving you seeds so that you can be led closer and closer to what is true for you. And that's really, especially for this whole mentorship program, is not to imprint a bunch of ideas on how to do this, but to give you this huge buffet of tools and insights and things from my experience and your experience so that we can help you find what's true for you and then begin to unlock the threads that are leading you closer to your soul's purpose. So if we, let's see what people are saying here before I get too far behind. Oh, this is cool. So this is good stuff. So, if we, let's say that we're with our partner, and I'm kind of reading between the lines on a couple of these things here, and we have something that we want to say, and or something that we want to ask for, and there's like this, maybe you're sitting on the couch, whatever it is, and you have a little bit of a pain for not saying it, and you have a little bit of a pain just before of what might happen if you do say it, right? And so we always have. Well, a lot of times we will have those inconsistencies because we believe that if we ask for what we want, we are being a burden to the person that we're asking from or asking that of, right? And part of the game is to not take someone else's power away. So when you don't ask for what you want, you are simultaneously taking the other person's power away to navigate the situation with complete information. For one, you want that thing. So you sacrificing yourself when you actually want the thing you want to ask for is operating in a diminished capacity because now your partner that you're trying to ask it from does not have complete information with which to interact with you. The analogy that I often give is, let's say you started a job at an office. You just started working there. And there is, let's say you're a guy and there's a pretty girl at the desk. And this will work in both sides. So you guys you'll get this from both angles. Let's say there's a girl at the desk and you come up to her and you offer her coffee. And she doesn't really like coffee, but she says yes. And so from then on, you start bringing her coffee every day, thinking you're doing this really loving, awesome thing because you really like this girl and you think you're doing this really nice thing for her. Well, 6 months goes by. And now finally she explodes and says, I never liked coffee. I wish you'd stop bringing it to me. I've been just trying to sip it the whole time just so you know, not feel bad for bringing it to me. And I just wanted you to like me and blah, blah, blah. And so now the guy feels super guilty for doing something he thought was really, really good. And you feel really guilty for not speaking up in the first place. Right. And so part of that game is to recognize that if you ask for something, if you talk about what you're feeling, or you're bringing up all these different things, you are providing additional information. If you need that person to give it to you, or if you need that person to react in a certain way, that is where you start to betray yourself. So part of the game is not necessarily needing somebody to fix it. And most of the time you don't. You just want to be seen and heard for what you want, right? So most of the time it has nothing to do with you actually receiving what you're asking for. It has to do with you actually simply just releasing it and allowing that desire to be seen, because you were judging that desire for whatever reason you were judging it. And if you can practice learning to ask from the lens that I'm just providing more information, and then also create that container where it's like, look, I'm feeling this thing. I don't need you to fix me. I don't need you to make me feel better. I just need to share it and get it out there. And most of the time, the sharing of it fixes the underlying pain that you're feeling, because that lack of sharing is a block of a flow of energy. And so simply sharing it and being able to look at it, which is all it really, that's all the ego wants. It's all our inner child wants. All of these things just want to be seen. You know, it just wants to be acknowledged. It doesn't need to be fixed. Fixed doesn't exist to our inner child. And so being able to realize that and find where you have your guards up around that. Because a lot of times we really show up in a guarded way. And when we're not willing to ask for what we want, or we're not willing to really to step through the pain of asking for what we want, because it is painful the first time you do it, until you realize, oh wait, this is kind of fun when I don't have to filter myself anymore. But it can be really a challenge to do that initially, because you have to confront the fear that if I ask for this, they won't like me. But the gift of that is, if they don't like you, you don't want to be with them anyway, because they're not interested in co-creating what you wanted to co-create in the first place. Right. And so that's pointing you to areas of your relationship where you're betraying yourself, even on that level. But at the same time, the more you're willing to ask without needing it to be delivered to you, the more you're willing to speak up about that, the more power you're able to have, because you're not at the whims of your partner. You're not at the whims of the universe providing for you, but you understand that all of these things get provided by you first outputting that energy. When you have things to say, but nothing comes out, a lot of times that's pointing you to a blocked throat chakra in some ways. So if you are also finding that you're struggling with creativity and you're struggling coming up with words, if you're struggling to say what you really mean, it could be a blocked throat chakra. It could also be that you are just needing to practice those creative endeavors that allow you to come up with that information, or you're operating on an obligation. So you actually don't have something to say, but there's a silence that's occurring that is painful to you, and you feel obligated to say something to break that silence. So as you can gain discernment on which of those is which, it allows you to be a little bit clearer on, oh, you know, I don't have anything to say right now, so it's okay to sit in silence, and it's okay for them to be the ones who are uncomfortable, in pain, feeling obligated to speak, right? And all of those, I'm reading at the same time, I keep getting distracted, and so all of those different pieces are always just pointing you back within. So the areas within you that you are withholding something. So if you are not making the money that you want to make, if you're not receiving the relationships and the love that you want to receive, all of these different things are always pointing you to where you have a program that's running that is causing you to withhold information, or withhold energy, or withhold love, or withhold abundance, or any of these kinds of things that, you know, all these different labels for energies that you can output. And so part of that game is to gain the sensitivity to this, you know, when I'm in abundance or when I'm in love, these things show up. When I'm in scarcity, or when I'm afraid, or when I'm withholding, these kinds of situations show up. And then being honest with yourself about those so that you can start to make new choices around it. So part of the reason that we are here is to learn really deep soul lessons that were created for us when we were children, when we were in our mother's womb. And these lessons are lessons that we've been trying to learn over the past 50 plus lifetimes. So we have literally failed at learning these lessons 50 lifetimes before we got here to practice this now. And that is really, really important, because why do you think you're going to be good at it your first try? If it's taken you 50 lifetimes of trial and error to figure some of these things out, and that has brought you to the level that you're at now, experiencing your reality, part of that is to give yourself patience and to give yourself, to honor the process of it so that you can continue to refine those lessons, to trace those lessons, and to see the threads of them in your relationships and in your career and in your interactions with your friends and in your interactions with your partners, and be able to say, oh, well, when this happened when I was a kid, that imprinted me with this idea, that caused this chain of events. So for example, I'll tell you some of my stories that I got both from color, mostly from color puncture, but from some ayahuasca stuff too. So when I was a kid, one of the things that came up was a 3-year-old event that happened. And I remember being outside of my great-grandmother's house. And I was outside. She had a big glass door, and I wanted to come inside. And I had knocked on the glass door. And then rather than me waiting for what was already on its way to me, waiting for my mom or somebody to come let me in the house, I jumped through the glass door. Right. And so that created a chain of events of a patience lesson that showed up in the same. So in color, at that point that corresponds with age 0.3 actually corresponds with the vertebrae that I broke when I was 17. So the broken ankles, the broken back, the different turning point moments in my life were created from that original imprint when I jumped through that window. And actually before that, during prenatal times and some other places. But what it was doing was I had a pattern where, I'd get this really big idea and then I'd launch it way too soon, or I'd run before I could walk. And being able to have the patience to put it together and have the faith in it and to not say yes to something because it just showed up, even though it's not quite what I was asking for. And taking that thread and seeing that thread in my relationships, where I was betraying myself in order to avoid betraying somebody else, where I was saying yes to something because I wasn't patient enough to wait for something else. And seeing the moments in my early childhood where I had, to rescue my mother, and where I had to grow up quickly, and where I had a damsel in distress story throughout my life, where in my relationships I kept betraying myself in order to avoid betraying them, because that's what I was shown love was. And being able to see that and see it ongoing in my relationships, and seeing the thread through all my relationships where I showed up that way, and being able to say, oh wait, I don't need to betray myself anymore. I can actually show up in my integrity and speak my truth. And then people can navigate around that in a much better way. And then all of the relationships level up. All the ability to communicate with everybody levels up. But it takes digging through each of those threads. It takes stepping through all of those different things to really understand, oh, my dad, who loved me and was an incredible father, also had programs that, we signed soul contracts such that he would traumatize me in the perfect way so that I could learn the lessons that I'm learning now. And that appreciation gives you a lot of power. When you look through the lens of, oh, why was this done to me? And why do these things keep happening to me? You're not owning your own power and then being able to navigate it with stronger choices. And so as you start to gain gratitude for these imprints, and you say, oh, well, I saw that my dad always interacted with my mom in this way, or my mom always received it in this way, or there were always these types of power dynamics in the relationship. you can start to say, oh, I see where those lessons are. And that's the same thing that I'm imprinting later. And I'm able to then show up in a different capacity because I can more strongly learn the lesson, show up differently because I'm proactively trying to make new choices. And then I can see all of those relationships dynamically change. Oh, thanks, Dan. I appreciate it. And yeah, I mean, it is traumatized in the perfect way is a really good way to put it, because that's what our life is. I'm going to do the color puncture. The color puncture session is going to be at 10 a.m. tomorrow. It will also be recorded, so both of these will be available. So what time are we? So we got some more time here. But yeah, so I'll be doing that tomorrow. You guys are all welcome to join it, whether you got the color puncture kit or not, if you just want to learn about it, if you want to see how those treatments work. For some of those other ones, I'll talk about it a little bit more then. And it will have a lot of synergy with some of the stuff we do here. So I might have some bonus sessions for folks who have the kits to be able to do some more provocative or strong or deeper treatments and that kind of thing if we want to do those through the mentorship also. But we'll see how that evolves. I would love to see that happen and see more practitioners using those kinds of tools because they are really good for pointing you to these threads. So one of the, a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. So you don't even know where to look at in your own life to say, oh, I have no idea what age points or what traumas were showing up at different times. So part of that game is to really just to reflect and meditate and pray on the idea of it, the intention of it, to say, what are those programs? What is a program that I can look at? What is happening in my current relationship? So if I am always keeping one foot out the door, if I'm always afraid to show affection, all of those are programs that were created in your childhood. And so if you can trace back to that and say, oh, well, maybe there was a less than ideal situation that I was seeing and I didn't want to get stuck in that. So that's why now I'm making the choices that I'm making. Can I let go of that idea? Am I ever truly stuck, or can I always leave something? Can I always say no? Even if there's this obligation that gets in place that I signed all these contracts or I signed all these agreements or I said I was going to do this thing, can I still honor myself and not be trapped in it? Absolutely you can. And part of that game allows you to be clearer when you're first making those agreements, so you stop saying yes to stuff that you should have been saying no to. But up until that point, you continue to say yes to stuff that you should be saying no to, so that you can gain clarity on how to interact with those different catalysts, because we need the contrast. We need to do it wrong. We need to do it in a way that doesn't feel good, so that we can continue to peel the layers of what is no longer us and what is no longer the way that we want to show up in relationship or in any of these different contexts, in business and in whatever in life. And if we can start to, I think the best way to start tracking this stuff is first just notice what you're feeling, right? So if you are having anxiety, if you're like having trouble sitting still, if you're wanting to go to the gym to dissipate what you're feeling, if you're feeling uncomfortable, even by the stuff that I bring up, if some of this stuff triggers you, all of these different emotions that are arising are a gift. They are a signal. And if you can give yourself permission to feel what you're feeling. So if somebody triggers you and it makes you really angry, or it makes you defensive, and you want to, somebody posted something on Instagram and it's misinformation. So you want to go in there and you want to rescue everyone else in their from the things that they said. Part of that pain is pointing you to an underlying narrative that you can choose to tell or not. And that's where the power is to find that narrative. So let's just, okay, so I'll talk about shame, doing your own thing. That's a good one too, to segue into this. So let's say that you have that's a false story, right? So somebody asked, how do you deal with shame when you go to do your own thing? How do you deal with the guilt of saying no to somebody? Or rejecting somebody because you wanted to do something else, or saying yes to yourself. Part of this is the narrative that is the obligation narrative that shows up when you are running that self-sacrifice program. So when you have been programmed your entire life to live self-sacrifice, when you finally start to honor yourself, you're going to feel guilty for it. It's going to feel painful because the narrative that's chirping in your ear from this committee is saying, I want to keep you safe. If you go and do this new thing, if you show up in this different way, if you serve yourself, you're not going to be safe, you're going to die. And so that guilt starts to well up. So part of that game is to give yourself permission to feel guilty, because you have a narrative going. You have a thing that is occurring within you that is causing you to experience that guilt. So that guilt is there. The last thing we want to do is say, don't feel guilty. You don't need to feel guilty. You don't need to feel that. That is a waste of your energy, blah, blah, blah. Because you're sitting there trying to convince yourself that what you're looking at with your eyes isn't there. You're looking at the sky trying to tell yourself that it's green instead of blue. And no amount of logic can get you through that. What does get through it is your ability to sit with that emotion and find it in your body. So like the child, it just wants to be seen. So if you have anxiety, it's usually kind of in this area of your body. If you have different kinds of, if you're having trouble figuring out what your purpose is or how to enact it in your life, and you keep having hip pain, all of these different indicators are always showing you where there's a certain type of energy flow that's blocked. And if you can say, okay, I am, I'm sitting here and I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. I have no idea how I'm going to show up in my purpose, or I'm going to afford to do this thing that I really want. But it's not your job to know the how. It's your job to know the intention. And when you get in your own way by trying to figure out the how, you simultaneously block the flow of the universe's energy through you to create the opportunities that you're asking for. And so if you can sit with that, when you feel that guilt and when you feel that shame around what you're going through and you're afraid of showing up in that new capacity, you can then sit into what you're feeling and just look at it in your body. Literally look at it. So you take your mind's eye and you look at that area and you just look at the sensation of what that guilt feels like, or the sensation of what that anxiety feels like. And for like 30 seconds is all it takes. It really doesn't take very long. We're just so programmed to dissipate what we're feeling, to run from what we're feeling, to go to the gym, to have sex, any of these kinds of things, because there's an agitation or something that builds up. And it's not that you can't give yourself permission to do those things. You absolutely can, but you want to do it from a place of integrity and awareness so that you are aware of and intentionally making choices that retain your power rather than giving your power away to dissipation. And so as you sit with that stuff, and that could be physically sitting, that could be you just like stopping for a minute in your car in the parking lot before you go in somewhere and just saying, you know what, I am anxious about this. I am anxious to do this chat today, to show up here. I don't know who's going to be there. I don't know who's going to ask me what questions. I absolutely can have anxiety about that because I don't know what's going to happen. And that's a reasonable thing to be afraid of. That's a reasonable thing to have show up. And so when you honor that and you give it permission, suddenly it just dissolves and it's done. But when you don't honor it and you're running from it and you're like, oh, what do I do? I need to keep doing more. I'm not enough right now. As I am, I'm not enough. I don't have enough tools. I don't have enough wisdom. I don't have enough of the message that I need to be right now. And so that's building up and you keep focusing on it, trying to add more to the pot, thinking it's more that is going to fix that. You're missing the fact that all these catalysts are doing, all these anxieties, all these fears are doing, are realigning you to say you already are enough. You already have all the tools that you need to navigate what is currently coming up for you and what you're currently doing. And then stepping through it and saying, you know what, how people react to me, how people interact with me, those are just projections of how they feel about themselves. And so all of us, everyone on the planet, whether it's your parents or it's you or it's your friends or it's your spouse or any of these people, the way that they interact, their reactions to you and your behaviors and your establishment of boundaries is not a reflection on you, but a reflection of how they feel about themselves. And so if you are outputting an energy and you're upholding your boundaries, but you also feel guilt, and then your partner stabs you for the guilt, part of it is pointing you to the fact that you're not honoring the fact that you feel guilty and you're not being honest. You can say, look, I feel really guilty for bailing on you today, but I really need to honor myself. And I get why you're upset and I hear you. And all these kinds of things that can come up in that dynamic, but then also realizing they're feeling a pain because they're holding on to an identity that they need to let go of. Not because you need to tell them, hey, you're holding on to something, let go of it, but you to have an awareness and an allowing container to say, I see what you're feeling. I see what you're going through. That's also a mirror for you. It's also a catalyst for you to gain that same kind of self-awareness that I am trying to cultivate by making this choice. And so part of that is to realize that you're both going to have that back and forth until you normalize and you get clear on your container about how you uphold those boundaries and how you interact. And that permission to step through that, and that permission to say, okay, it's not my job to rescue somebody from what they're feeling. Because me rescuing somebody from what they're feeling, me rescuing them from what they're going through, is betraying their soul in its endeavor to learn the lessons that it came here to learn. Because if someone got hurt, if they tripped and fell, if they had a traumatic, their boss yelled at them and it made them feel really bad, or they had a shock that came to them. All of these things are gifts from their soul trying to guide them back into alignment. And so if you come in and you rescue them from what they're feeling, from that catalyst, they don't have the catalyst they needed to come into that alignment, and more catalysts will just keep showing up in spite of you. This is why you never want to spend time rescuing somebody. You want to just show up, because you showing up demonstrates for them, and then they can decide, oh, I want to cultivate that freedom too. I want to cultivate that power also. But if you're so fixated on rescuing them from their lack of power, they're never going to learn how to tap into that power, because when you're rescuing, you're also giving your power away. And so part of that game is saying, okay, I'm going to provide this safe container for experience. And this is what I'm going to allow, and this is what I would love to see within this container. And anything, and then communicating with your partner saying, how would you like to interact within this container? And being able to be clear on what that container looks like, so that when these interactions happen, you don't need to rescue, you don't need to fix, you don't need to do these different things that are self-sacrifice, but you're able to show up in a full capacity and interact within this, not realizing that the way this person's interacting with you is not because you need to change, but because you just need to allow a space to see them, and you hear them and look at them and allow that interaction to happen. And let's see what people are asking. Practice, we continue to learn. So let's say you're in it. So you have you're having some financial difficulties, you're having some relationship difficulties. All these things probably tend to happen all at the same time. And so when those underlying stresses show up, and you're feeling agitated, and you're used to going to, maybe you smoke weed, or maybe you use other different things to dissipate what you're feeling. The first game initially is just recognizing that you're feeling something and recognizing that there is something that you're feeling that you don't want to feel. And that initial indicator, just becoming aware of that, will help you to catch it sooner and sooner. So a lot of times initially that has built up to a really big level that's really hard for you to sit with, because it's such a strong push against the barrier that you're trying to withhold, that it's really hard to process. But if you can start to just notice it when it comes up, and if you initially have to dissipate to renormalize it, that's okay. Give yourself permission to do that. But as you gain that awareness, at each time that comes up, you're going to catch it sooner and sooner. It's going to be a lighter and lighter touch each time. And then you're going to be able to then more easily sit with it. Like I said, it does not take very long. If you're getting wound up in this interaction, part of your ability is to say, I'm noticing that I'm starting to get really wound up and I'm starting to act defensive. Why am I acting defensive? What am I defending? Who am I defending? And do I need to defend that? And being able to allow that vulnerability, that part of the conversation to say, I'm arguing with you right now, I'm battling with you, and I'm getting agitated, whether it's a boss or a partner or whatever, I'm battling with you and getting agitated. Can I allow that to exist, and then step in backwards and reflect and say, am I being defensive here? Do I need to be defensive? What happens if I don't fight this? What happens if I just let it be as it is? What if I let this person who is arguing from their standpoint, what if I step into their shoes and say, what they believe right now is 100% a valid perspective to them. So the thing that they are fighting with us on is 100% valid. Even if you don't agree with it, it is 100% valid. And one of the things I really struggled with for a long time was there were a lot of times where my mom would not be at her best, let's say, and she would believe the sky was yellow. And I felt obligated to convince her that the sky was blue because I needed to save her because I wanted her to be better so that I felt good, right? And so that mirror, and this is actually probably a lesson that my dad told me several times that took a long time to digest, to realize it's not my job to convince her that the sky isn't yellow. It's my job to honor that she believes it's yellow and just to enjoy the fact that she believes it's yellow. You know, to find a common ground in the interaction with whoever I'm debating with, where I'm getting defensive because I need someone to agree with what my ego's identity is trying to get me to agree with. So can I then use this information? Can I then use that to say, you know what? They're arguing with me because they believe what they're believing. I may think what they're trying to do is dumb. But by me arguing, I'm not going to get across to them the energy that I'm trying to get across. They're not going to hear me. And so that's why you can't tell people things. You can't teach them that way. You have to just show up and say, I want to do this thing, and I'm going to show up in this thing, and I'm going to try this thing. And it's your job to uphold your boundaries around it. And it's your job to be clear in your agreements. And it's your job to do that so that I can have my freedom, and then you can have your freedom. And we can also operate within a safe container to express that freedom. And that's a process. That's something that you're going to be refining all the time, you know, and exactly respecting their individual universe. You know, everybody's reality is created by their personality. So where you are today, no one started where you started. No one had the birth that you had. No one had the birth trauma that you had. Nobody had the early life blessings. Nobody had the early life struggles. Nobody had the series of events that brought you through your life. Nobody did the jobs you did or had the relationships that you specifically had. Only you had those. And so from this point, you know more about your life than anybody possibly can, which means no one is better suited for making decisions than you are. Along these same lines, many of you coming to this chat, I've never interacted with a lot of you before. Some of you I have, but some of you I haven't. I have no idea what your personality is. I have no idea what your story is. I have no idea what your history is. So what's to stop you from putting any mask you possibly want on and trying any personality and any story and showing up in that with any of these new interactions that you can possibly have? What's to stop you from just playing around with that idea and finding what feels good to you and is unfiltered to you and your ability to show up and interact? And that's the case everywhere. It's not just me that doesn't know you. There's people everywhere who don't know you. Your family doesn't know you. And that's important to honor because you're so preoccupied with filtering yourself for your family that you don't realize that they don't know. They don't know what you went through. They hear the stories afterwards maybe, but they have no clue all of these different things and your perception and the lenses through which that you saw all of these different puzzles. And so if you can honor that and you can really come from your integrity to step through the fact that, wait, I have a lot of wisdom in this specific scenario because I'm the only one who's been through this specific scenario or this specific life. And that is a really powerful place to be so that you can start to interact with your reality from your own integrity and your own power. Because we're so used to saying, should I do this? Or I feel obligated to do this thing, or is this right or wrong? That we get stuck in unable to make the decisions that we're really wanting to make, that we're not able to step forward in the capacity that we want because we've spent so much time sacrificing ourselves for what we think other people want to see. So if you're on your social media and you are afraid to talk about your new information, if you have wisdom that pours out to you in the conversations with friends, but you're afraid to share that wisdom on social media, or you're afraid to show up in that new hat, or you're afraid to wear that costume that makes you feel good. All of those things bring me to the question of, why do you want to be friends with those people anyway? And are you even friends with them? So you have all of these people that you filter yourself in front of because you want these people to like you. And these people haven't even given you money. So why do you need these people to like you when they aren't even interested in interacting with you energetically? You're so preoccupied with filtering yourself so that people like you, even though they're not trying to be part of your tribe. They don't want to see you for you. They want to see you for the version of you that makes them feel good. And so you disconnecting from that need and showing up in your fullest capacity and saying, fuck them, who cares what they think of me? Because the right people who like my medicine and who feel good when I'm interacting with them are going to show up and co-create that with me. They're just, they can't not, and it'll push away the people who are not supposed to be there. And so having a willingness to say, I need to push these people away. These people do need to dissolve from my experience. They might come back later once they have also expanded their awareness in the right way. But it's about being agile in the navigation of that with a level of faith that allows you to play with this game and to show up in a greater capacity so that you can find the depths of the love within you for the power that you're able to give to the world, for the seeds that you're able to give. Because we all have those specific experiences through our life. And we all have the different moments where we have been a teacher for somebody. And we all have moments where we feel like we failed and we feel like we've tried a thing that didn't work out. And all of these failures and all of these different things that didn't work out quite in the capacity that we wanted them to are dynamically and distinctly pointing you to deeper layers of your purpose for what information you have collected throughout your life that you can help other people with. That the transformation that you have been through, that you can then help other people through. Whether you use that transformation, that catalyst to make you money, or you use that transformation and catalyst to just be a blessing to other people's lives, that's 100% up to you. Part of what we will dig into in this group is how to take those different stories and how to take those different elements and learn where they're pointing you and how you can start to turn that into an income and into a medicine for your people. And so a lot of the things that I do, I have a lot of different ways that I bring in money. I'm not just doing coaching. I'm not just selling a product. I realize that the more streams of income that I can create, the more things that I can use to make me $1, the more I have to as a net to keep my abundance flowing, right? And so not trying to find the one thing that's going to rescue you, or the one thing that's going to save you financially, or the one thing that is going to be the thing, but realizing there's a lot of different things, and all of them could be a little breadcrumb. And you can take that little thing, and then you can have a little bit of wisdom here, and you can take that little thing, and you're able to then use that to grow it. And it's the growing of it that's fun, not the having of it. So I tell a lot of my students when I was teaching hand balancing for a long time, it's not the having of a handstand that's fun. It's the growing and the process of training the handstand that's fun. And that's the same with any skill. All of this stuff is a development of a skill. And if we can continue to develop that skill through all of this stuff, just by practicing it and enjoying the process of doing it well and then not doing it well, and having a appreciation of the way that unfolds and the way that those signals alter your reality, then you can start to have fun in those contrasts. Then you can start to have fun in those interactions. You're like, oh, I showed up and it caused these people to run away from me, or I showed up and I really triggered them and they're battling me because it revealed a pain within them. Because now I can have fun stroking the fire in that way, because I realize how powerful that is for people. I don't need to feel guilty for that, because I know it's important, and that I'm planting that seed in that process. And in the same way that if I want to try a new business, even though these things may not work, I recorded all of it. So it's all recorded. It'll be uploaded to YouTube, so you guys will be able to watch it later. That whole process of unfolding is the fun part that allows you to gain more. Let me tell you a different analogy. So if you're a giant ship, that ship cannot maneuver very well. If you're a fleet of little tiny ships, now those can move all over the place and be agile. And so part of the game is to maintain agility by getting more clarity with how you can interact with your reality. So I probably could talk all night long. So I'm going to probably start to slow this down. Does anybody have any other questions? Do you have any questions about mentorship? Do you have any questions about what we went over so far? Any thoughts that came up? We can discuss that for a little bit longer, and then I'll upload this to YouTube, and this one will be open for everybody if you want to rewatch it, if you want to listen to it again. I think there's a lot of really good stuff in here. And each time we do these chats, we will probably talk about both deeper layers of this as well as different topics. So like I said, I'm doing 8 sessions a month. So 2 a week is my plan. I might adjust the timing a little bit so people can show up if this is a good or a bad time. We'll see. But I'm planning to do several of these and collecting them. So they'll all be recorded. They'll all be in the database. So even if you miss one, you'll be able to go back and watch it. We'll be doing them specifically on discovering your purpose. We'll be just doing them on money. We'll be doing them on relationships. We'll be doing them on the spiral stuff that I teach. So if you're interested in doing some of the movement stuff and the posture correction and some learning the formula that I use for my spiral movement, all of these things will be taught in this ongoing. The movement stuff I'll probably teach as workshops and just teach you guys how that system works. And as we dig into it more, we'll make it more and more interactive. What I'd love to see as this evolves is figuring out how to interact a little bit better and getting you guys on the Facebook group so that as this stuff comes to the surface, we can continue to discuss it and I can continue to support you through whatever's coming up for you. And then we will be also doing, I'll probably be teaching some stuff on how to sell stuff on Amazon. I'll be teaching some magic rituals that I use, whether it's a banishing ritual or some of the cord cutting stuff, which is really awesome for relationship things when we have negative karmic ties with people. It's good for a whole lot of stuff actually, but there's a whole bunch of different rituals that I plan to teach. We'll be doing some intention setting things with like the new moons, and all of that stuff will be really, really powerful. So we'll be doing a lot of really powerful stuff with a lot of really powerful tools. If you haven't looked at the program, I should have brought it up. I would have scrolled through it, but we can look at it. I'll do another video of that. But the program already has a ton of stuff. I put all of my all of my fitness programming that I've used for my online coaching clients. So all of that programming is in there. You can absolutely do 1 month on and off, cancel whenever. I would love to see people commit to it long-term, but I want to see people get the value for it. So it's not for me. This is as much as I can give for you guys. And, I hopefully will get a little bit of support in return. But I would love to, keep piling on value into that program, adding more of the spiral stuff to it. There's already mobility stuff. There's gymnastics inspired fitness stuff in there. There's spiral programming, a couple of different programs. There are several different kind of dream therapies. There's, a whole list of different things that I've put in there. So there's a lot of content. It'll keep growing. Oh, the fear workshop is also in there. If you haven't watched that, the fear workshop is super, super powerful. It's a little bit long, but you'll definitely want to take notes for that one. Because there's a lot of really good stuff that came up in that workshop. And let's see, what are folks asking? Yep. The color puncture video probably will be uploaded also. I think I'll have both of those as feeders or whatever, so people can watch these videos and get an idea of how it'll work. Obviously, some of this stuff will evolve a little bit and keep refining, because this is a new thing for me also. And hopefully you guys got a lot out of it. Let me know what you thought. Send me a DM later as you digest a little bit, or if you watch the video again once I upload it to YouTube. Please give me some feedback. Let me know what I can do better. Maybe if you can help me learn how to interact better, get people to ask questions, that kind of thing, that might be helpful also. But hopefully you guys got great information. Hopefully you got some seeds planted that will help you in whatever endeavors are coming up this year. Obviously, we have a really big eclipse coming up on January 12th with some really strong astrology right now. So if you're feeling the heaviness, if you are feeling like a lot of things are kind of going backwards in the wrong direction right now, that's normal. That's what's happening. It's a really big review period of a whole bunch of stuff just coming up to the surface. But once we hit that January 12th moment, we're starting a completely new era. So there's both a 500-year cycle that's ending and a 20-year cycle that's ending on that day. So there's going to be a pretty big shift that will likely happen for a lot of us. That shift may have a gradient, so it's probably not going to be an instantaneous thing, but you will certainly feel some feels from that astrology. And it will be a pretty big turning point day, I think, for us, just in terms of gaining some momentum and accelerating through this year, and seeing some changes of how we interact with reality as well. Because I think there's a lot of stuff that's going to be shifting politically, a lot of stuff shifting financially, all of that kind of stuff, how we make money, how we interact with authority. A lot of those things, because of the Saturn, Pluto astrology, as well as Jupiter, all of that stuff is going to put a magnifying glass on a lot of those concepts. I have some videos that I can send you guys if you DM me for watching a little bit more specifically about the astrology of that. I know just barely enough to be slightly dangerous, not quite enough to dig into all the different themes of all the different planets necessarily. But the shift will absolutely be positive. I think leading up to it, it might be challenging. There's certainly always going to be challenges. The whole point we're here is to learn these lessons. So it's not like it's all of a sudden all these lessons are going to be removed. We'll always have our mirrors. We'll always have all these things that we're needing to step through. And we're not magically going to have an easy time showing up, because that's part of the game. That's part of the process. But we will have certain things like when, Jupiter is in the right place, we'll have an easier time making money. All of that kind of stuff can happen. So I super appreciate you guys coming here. I love that so many people showed up and were participating and stayed for the whole time. And we're asking questions and interacting. I really appreciate you guys. So looking forward to hopefully seeing some of you guys tomorrow morning if you're interested in color puncture. And if not, I'll upload all those videos, and I'll chat with you guys soon. So have a good night, guys, and morning, or whatever time it is everywhere else for folks who are not on the East Coast. So